and then we're going to get going. So welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us today. In the spirit of everyone's time and respecting your time, we're just going to jump right in and get going. I'm really happy to be here with you today in light of all the difficulties that are going on in our world today. So welcome. We have an hour together today, and it's really focused today, our webinar. It's our first live webinar, so we're learning all the new technologies as we adjust to our new world. And it's really focused on helping community businesses navigate these unknown territories with regards to HR. And definitely, no doubt, these are difficult times for everybody involved. There's a lot of stress and frustration and fear happening. And it's forced all businesses like us to actually look at our business differently and to make decisions, hard decisions that we've maybe never had to make before. And we're being forced to make them without having the full picture and all of the information in our hands. So it's difficult. I acknowledge that. We understand it. We're living it at Durham HR Solutions as well. So there's a lot of information also circulating, and it's coming out fast and furious. And I know the places like the chambers have done an excellent job sharing different relevant pieces of information. And so our goal today is to try to consolidate all that information and pick out the key pieces that are relevant to you as an employer as you're navigating your people decisions and changes you might need to make to your business. So, and we put this content together based on questions that we've been asked by our current clients, just to make sure that it's actually relevant. And really our goal, this is no strings attached, this is our goal. Many of you are giving back to the community, and this is our mission today, was how can we do our part and share our knowledge and expertise and actually give back to the community in this way as well. So we are proud members of all of the different chambers, and we're excited to actually provide this assistance to you guys. Before we jump in, so everybody's muted, just to help manage the time. We have some pretty detailed content today. I'm going to move us through it. I would ask though that if you have a paper and pen handy, as you think of questions, write them out, because I'm going to gather all your questions at the end, and make sure we figure out a way to get you some answers to those questions. So we'll figure out what's the most effective way to do that. So, okay, we're just gonna, so who the heck am I? You probably are asking here. So here's a little bit about me, a little bit of my background, but truthfully, I would tell you the most important thing that I would tell you about myself is my philosophy on HR in general. For me, I am a business partner first and an HR partner second. And I think the most value that HR can bring organizations is not necessarily by policing policies and procedures and benefits and all those things, but truly partnering with the business to meet their strategic imperatives. And so that is what I do. And that's why I was so happy to join Durham HR Solutions and to get to be a bit of an entrepreneur myself, to set up this business and build it. And it's really critical that that philosophy about HR is how we will be servicing and service all our existing clients in the Durham HR Solutions front. So let's just quickly jump in and review what the heck has been happening. So this is actually probably outdated as we speak. So this is an excellent link you can use to actually get the current stats. So global snapshot, where we are with the cases, deaths recovered, and Canada. We know that as of Friday in Durham region, we had 18 confirmed cases, but 0 deaths as of Friday. However, we're expecting the likelihood of that changing is high, and we know we have 2 recovered in the Durham region. So lots of things happening pertaining to the global pandemic we're experiencing. So this is a quick timeline. Everything that's happening is fast and is furious, and we don't have all the information. So our first case in Canada, January 25th, and then resulting in a, today, 1,470 active cases. That's like a 5,000+% in cases as we're dealing with the virus. a lot of things. So the top part of the arrow is all of the kind of the key events that have happened, and the bottom is how we've been responding to all of these different events, right? From our school closures, working from home, social distancing, closing of public facilities, the pandemic, or sorry, on March 18th, the announcement of the economic stimulus plan, and then the reduction of non-essential travel between Canada and the US on the 19th. And so there's more to come, no doubt, but this is just a reminder of we are in uncharted waters. We've never experienced this, and we have to be thoughtful of how much change we're experiencing. And change can be hard for us at the best of times. And so, lots going on. And so what we have heard is more than 500,000 Canadians applied for EI last week. And one gentleman on the news was saying that it's expected our unemployment rate will be around a 20% rate. And that is very similar, apparently, to what the unemployment rate was back in the Great Depression times. So that is scary all around for our economy. And obviously we're focusing on the health and safety of all of our Canadians, and you'll hear it all over the news. I'm sure you're keeping a close eye, as am I. So we need to think about how long this is going to last, and nobody knows at this point. So there's a lot of speculation, but businesses like us, we're being forced to make decisions in the here and now when we don't have information about what's happening long term, and that can be very challenging for businesses. So the global economies, I mean, they have plummeted. So we as businesses are looking at our numbers and our business financials deeper and closer than perhaps ever before. And we're looking at how do we sustain our businesses? What's our payables? What's our receivables? What's our staffing that we need to have? How's our supply chains been interrupted? And so how do we do this? This is tough. A lot of businesses have closed. You hear all over the news of many layoffs. So really a lot of information and a lot more to come. I know that the House of Commons is meeting tomorrow to talk about the financial aid. So there's going to be more in there. How do we access the funding, and all of the qualifiers for the different elements of that needs to still be announced. So with regards to that, there's still a great deal of things that are unknown for us. So today, we're covering some of the key themes we've heard. So we wanted to make sure we're covering what we've heard is relevant. And there's three overarching themes, and it's really about the key HR legislation. So I want to go through really quickly what they are and why they're important, how there's interplay with the three items. I want to talk about day-to-day issues. So we have some example questions that you might be asked by your employees, and some strategies around managing communication, managing information, and answering questions. And then the last is temporary layoffs. Want to spend some time on that particular front, as it's a real, it's a real item that many businesses are considering. And our goal is to really help you make informed decisions as it relates to your employees today, based on the environment that we know. So we're happy to share whatever information we have. So the relevant legislation in Ontario, so the Employment Standards, Human Rights, Health and Safety, these are the big ones, for most of us that are provincially regulated. I'd say that the good news is that there hasn't been a great deal of change around the different legislation yet. However, I would caveat that by saying how we apply the legislation is what's changing. So these things, we have to look at these things a little differently and scrutinize how we're making decisions in these realms a little differently than we did 3 weeks ago. And I think there's more to come in changes, but I want to go through high level some of the quick hits. So the Employment Standards Act, there is a lot of employment standards, job protected leaves, leave of absences that exist. And then there's been the latest provision, the announcement of the infectious disease emergencies and the fact that we've declared an emergency leave. We still don't know the parameters of what's involved in that particular leave of absence. If you look at the Ministry of Labor website around it, it says more to come. So again, this is something we need to keep our ear to the ground and listen to what is this infectious disease emergency going to cover? Who are they going to cover? And the declared emergency leave, what does that mean? How many days does this cover? So basically, in our landscape today, there is a heightened need to, or more employee protections related to absences, and employers are going to be asked to support that at a higher bar than perhaps we have in the past. And that can be difficult when we're also trying to manage our financials of the business, because this is tough to navigate for sure. So I'm going to specifically later ask questions or answer questions, hopefully around how do I manage leaves? Do I have to pay them? And that sort of stuff. So share some insight on that. Let me just check my notes. Oh, in addition, you probably heard Ford speaking the other day, and he made it very clear that that people should not be or have to worry about the security of their job if they have to quarantine or self-isolate, or if they have to stay home to look after kids, etc. So the challenge for us as businesses is managing that sort of bar that's been set and trying to keep our businesses viable. Okay. High-level human rights. So human rights, so the only thing I'd call out around human rights is the Commission has indicated that they are, their stance that COVID-19 is now considered a disability. So it hasn't been tested. We don't know how the tribunal is going to respond to this or when cases are brought forward. This is kind of a bit of a new thing. So we need to make sure that when we're making decisions, so prohibit discrimination, including harassment and negative treatment against people related to COVID, is prohibited. So if you think about what does that mean in your day-to-day businesses, well, how are you going to handle it if somebody knows that their colleague that's 2 rows over has been exposed, or maybe knows somebody who has COVID-19, and now there's all this fear that's expressed around that. So how do you make sure there's no negativity and hostility? And a lot of this is going to be through communication and education, which I will share some ideas around that as we go. The duty to accommodate that employers have is not changing, but it also now applies to the COVID-19, and you need to make sure you're aware of this duty to accommodate to the point of undue hardship, and that undue hardship bar based on cost, health, and safety. You need to be aware of what that means. So how do I support people, and how do I make sure I'm accommodating their needs? And what you're going to see is that human rights needs to be considered as you're making your decisions, right? So there's a lot of interplay. So as you're making your decisions around your people, who's impacted, you need to be continuously evaluating your people that are impacted and making sure you're looking to make sure that you don't have the appearance, or you're not systemically discriminating against any one particular protected group. So without getting into a lot of details, we'll cover this in some examples later, but you need to make sure that it's part of your thought process as you go through this. So health and safety, this is a pretty big one. I have 3 slides on this, but want to talk about reasonable precautions. So I haven't seen anything that indicates the law, or there's been adjustments to the law, but I want to call out this reasonable precaution piece. So we as employers have to keep a safe and well-maintained workplace and take all reasonable precautions. The difference today in our environment is what was considered reasonable 3 weeks ago is not considered reasonable today. So people are thinking about, well, do I have to put hand sanitizer stations in? Nobody's probably knocking at your door telling you that, but you probably should be. It's probably now a reasonable precaution. Examples I've listed, the additional cleaning measures, eliminating visitors, leveraging technology, making sure you're trying to figure out ways to support social distancing while at the office. So there's a lot of different ways that you can do this, and you really need to make sure that you're really reviewing your precautions and taking them and communicating and sharing them with your employees, because it's really key, and it will help build their confidence that you're actually doing the right thing and you have their best interest at heart. Try to do what you can in this particular front. You've probably seen, I was at Farm Boy a few days ago, and they've now instituted the, I keep calling it bubble wrap, but like the partitions that separate the cashiers, so that they're actually protected. So that in today's environment is probably a very good reasonable precaution to take. considering the pandemic we're going through. So actions, again, I talked about this. Consider what reasonable precautions you are taking with your business. Good idea, gather input from your staff, get them involved, and really proactively listen and communicate. There's a lot of optics to this. Even if you can't if the suggestions that your staff are make to you, it will demonstrate you're truly listening to them and that you have their best interests at heart. So, excuse me. So what should you communicate with employees? So really around sharing the severity of the situation, reinforcing the importance of it, the preventative measures you are taking or your reasonable precautions, the steps you're taking to manage the disruption. So you might be forced to make decisions around how you operate in general. And then, again, the steps you're taking to maximize their safety. I can't stress enough, this is really, really important to the success and buy-in of your employees. And so really trying to be proactive with communication is highly advised. So lastly, on health and safety. So the right to refuse unsafe work. This is no different than what it was before. However, you need to keep this in mind because you might have employees that start using this language, like perhaps they're calling in saying, I'm not coming, it's not safe there. So you need to understand and navigate this, and this can be very frustrating, and I understand that. Employees do have the right to refuse work if it's likely to endanger them. So this endanger word is really key, and later I have this chart that we summarized, hopefully to help you to summarize all of the guidelines around what is considered high risk when it comes to the COVID. So understanding how the definitions and the experiences of COVID are impacting this particular right to refuse work. So there are protections from the Occupational Health and Safety Act, preventing employers from disciplining or terminating employees if they do refuse to work. So practice follow your normal practices. So you need to notify your health and safety committee or your health and safety rep. And if you don't know, seek help. This could be new. You could be a small employer and really have, no protocols currently in place. So this is something that if you didn't know, I would seek to find out. And then just a reminder about the threshold to exercise the right to refuse work. So it's an exceptional mechanism. It should be very serious and not be taken lightly by employees. Nor can it be used just to solve general workplace problems. So the Ministry of Labor also can help you with this particular navigating this, because if you can't resolve these internally, part of the investigation process would be to involve the ministry as well. I know they're getting a ton of calls around this as well. And then if a workplace does pose a clear danger to the health and safety of its employees, it might be reasonable to refuse to continue to work. So keep this in mind as you navigate. So want to jump right into day-to-day issues with staff. And so to sort of give you some ideas maybe and bring up some of the questions that we've heard a lot of our clients are asking. I want to talk about how you're adjusting your workforce, so around hours and possible shift changes and all these different things that you're probably thinking about to reduce your expenses and keep your business long-term viable for the future. Want to talk about the key definitions related to COVID-19 that I hope you'll find helpful, and some employer questions that you might be asked that just to give you some guidance around how to answer some of these. Excuse me. Okay, so ways that businesses are adjusting their workforce. So we've heard lots, right? People are thinking about adjusting hours, working from home, maybe sliding shifts and start and end times so that they're reducing the number of people that are in the workplace at the same time, giving people an option as which shifts they want to work because of, Dustin was just asking me if I'd like a coffee. Isn't that very nice of them? Anyway, modifying, so being flexible and sliding shifts, reducing operating hours. A lot of businesses are doing that, right? Leveraging video conferencing, we're doing this. So we interview people, and part of our process is to do face-to-face interviews. Well, we realize we need to evolve, and we need to think about, okay, how can we continue to do our job effectively? And so we're forced into this video conferencing territory. So think about being creative, and ultimately, it's a realistic place if you're also considering downsizing or reducing your workforce. And later we're going to talk about temporary layoffs if that's something you're considering. Also wanted to say there is a work sharing program through Service Canada that you may want to look at. That's interesting. There's a guidebook right on the website. So if you're thinking about exploring that, that could be something that you could leverage as well. So, you know, the last thing I will say here is, when you think about the wage subsidy, so the government has said there will be a subsidy, which is equal to 10% of remuneration paid for a 3-month period, and it's capped per employee, and it's capped at $25,000 per employer. So this might be something that you need to figure out. So I know the House of Commons is meeting tomorrow, so we should be hearing very soon. If not, it might already be out there. I just haven't had a chance to look today, but around how to access that money. So the question for us as businesses is that money enough to help us? Is that a resource that can help us, or it needs to be included in our decision making around our adjustments of our workforce? So, so keep your eye on that as well, right? As you're thinking about what you need to do to keep your business viable. So I am now at what do employers need to consider when making adjustments. So this one is interesting because you got to be thoughtful. So what adjustments? So are you thinking about reducing hours, schedule adjustments, all those different things we talked about on the previous slide? What is necessary to keep your business viable long term? What steps do you need to take? Once you determine the appropriate action, you need to know what kind of a timing of when. And is it now? Do you have a slush fund financially that'll allow you to carry on, you know, for a period of time? So obviously this will be financial driven, but sort of set some timelines for yourself. Really being thoughtful of your policies, procedures, practices, contracts, and collective agreements if applicable. So, you know, as you're making decisions, you need to be aware of what's my sick leave policy? What's my short-term disability policy if I have one? How is my vacation policy running? What's my rules? What's my own internal set of rules I've established for my business? Some of you might not have any, but if you do, you need to make sure that you're actually revisiting them. And the concept of practice, I would say, as a fundamental rule of thumb, practice technically tends to outweigh policy. So I'll give you an example. If you don't have a policy, but you've been paying sick leave for your employees, you've been paying 3-4 days a year, well, technically that is your policy. Your practice is your policy. So even if you don't have it written down, ask yourself, well, what's my practice around sick leave? What have I been doing? And then how do I make sense of how to do it on a go forward? And this is tough. So if you seek advice and help on all of this stuff. And then the second last point, understanding employee impact. So once you decide, well, I need to reduce shifts, I need to do layoffs, I need to do whatever the case may be, you need to understand who's impacted. And you need to be thoughtful of human rights implications, because if you've set up a standard criteria and all of a sudden you realize, you write out a list of names of people impacted and you realize they're all women, you might not have intentionally meant to do that, but there is a human rights implication because it's called systemic discrimination. So you need to make sure that you're evaluating and you're looking at who's impacted by your changes you're making, and that you're aware that there could be some human rights implications. And then really key is the communication. And if you aren't clear on any of these things, seek guidance, seek advice from your HR department, from the ministry in some of these cases, from whoever you use. You might be an employment lawyer, but seek to find out and understand. So I did this for my own self because I like everything on one page, so don't worry about all the words, but I tried to consolidate what are all these definitions and what do they mean. And so for me, I actually want to add on the chart the social distancing definition, because I think this would be an excellent tool to share with employees because there's lots of information. There's high risk, low risk, medium risk, but this close contact is considered high risk of exposure, and that's really a key definition we want to make sure we know and that you're comfortable with. It's all over the news, so I'm sure this isn't new news for you, but it's, for me, I liked having it all in one spot, and so hopefully you'll find this helpful. And if anybody wants a copy of this deck after, just shoot us an email and I'll give you the contact at the end, and we'd be happy to share it. Okay. So this is also a quick reference guide. So here's how a sample decision tree could work for you. And this is actually also a great idea to share with your employees. So this is based on the guidelines that are out there. The left is all the different events. So has the employee received a diagnosis or been tested? Have they returned from travel? Have they had close contact according to the definition we just looked at? Do they live for or care with someone having close contact? If yes to any of those, do not come to work. If no to all, they technically have the capability to go to work and self-monitor, and we'll talk about the caveats to this now, right? Because there's a lot of stress that's coming from this. So even though technically they could come to work in these and have none of these signs or symptoms, there's a lot of other reasons maybe they're saying, I don't want to come to work, and that's the tough piece. So before we get there, I want to call to does the employee at the bottom box on the left. So this is really key. So if you have employees that are in one of these risk of developing severe symptoms of COVID, so the elderly, over 60, underlying health conditions, weakened immune systems. I added pregnant. I'm not actually sure I read that anywhere, and I think they're not quite sure the impact. I know that for sure as a pregnant, I'm not pregnant, but for pregnant women, it would be very scary in today's day and age. So do you know who these people are for your business? And how do you make sure you're taking action and working with them proactively to figure out how they're feeling and how you can support them through these times? Okay. So how do I handle staff who come back from holidays and are now self-isolating, and do I have to pay them? So before I get to the answer to that, I want to talk about the fact that it's required, and really be considerate of if you can allow these people to work from home or not. Some it will be yes, some it will be no. And you need to, again, be cognizant of your employee agreements and all of that stuff. Generally speaking, you don't have to pay them for this time. However, you could choose to if you wanted to, and if affordable. Or you could ask them if they wanted to use their vacation or sick time. You can't mandate it for vacation, but you can ask them if they have it earned and accrued. You can ask them if they want to use it. So if it's unpaid, they can apply for EI for the 14 days, and there's no waiting period. So here's a sample communication strategy that one of our clients has used, and I just really liked it. So they did it proactively. They wrote a list of everybody that had been traveling. They called each person individually. They reminded them that they need to self-isolate. They discussed working from home options. They confirmed if it was paid or unpaid. They asked about the vacation time, and then they reminded them about EI. And so you would need to know also about a record of employment, I think, for this particular thing as well. So you need to make sure, have the proactive conversation, because it also sends the message to everybody else that you're taking this very seriously. How do I handle situations with staff who don't show up for work or refuse to work and don't meet self-isolation criteria? So you've looked at the chart. They don't meet, they're fully, according to the chart and the signs and symptoms, they should be able to come to work, but they're scared, but they just don't want to come. Maybe they're not even giving you a reason. They're just saying, I'm not coming. They're just refusing to work. So proactively contact the employee, find out why they're not coming to work. Now's not the time to make rash decisions or assume they've quit or abandoned their job. I would say with all of the leave entitlements, with all of this stuff happening, now's not the time to make those decisions. If the reason meets any of the job protected leave requirements, so like the likelihood it will, if they're not coming to work for any other reason than exercising their right to refuse work, they are likely covered by one of the job protected leaves, to be honest. Could be that they're not, but they likely are. So some specific scenarios. So in this case, right, so do they qualify for ESA? Employment Standards Act leaves, there's like the 14, I think, options plus the new one coming out. Do they want to use vacation? Are they going to apply for EI? You need to provide a record of employment. And then I would be talking to the employee about how do we keep in touch with you? What's the best way to continue to communicate with you during the process? If they don't qualify for ESA leave and you're 100% sure, which I think would be a rare situation in this particular day and age, you could take advantage of reminding them of the safety precautions, reviewing the health definitions that we went through with the chart, evaluating whether they can work from home, talking about vacation again, if they want to use it, if it's applicable. You know, does the employee have high risk of severe illness? So the elderly, the weaker, weakened immune, and really being flexible and exploring alternative options. If no other, I would, if you have no alternative way to support people and you're pretty sure they don't qualify, seek advice for sure. If you absolutely need them to come to work. And then you need to think about the human rights impact. If you don't know if they qualify for ESA, seek advice and ask, find out. There's tons of areas you can go. You might have an HR department, you might have a policy on it, you might have an employment lawyer you talk to, or you can even reach out to us. We'd be happy to help. If they exercise their right to refuse work, follow a health and safety protocols and seek advice as well, I would suggest. What if I don't want my employees to work from home and I need them to come into work? So this is a really, hard one, right? So if you don't allow your employees to work from home and they have children at home, this could constitute discrimination on the basis of family status. So this is an example of how the human right interplay can happen here. So you have to accommodate to the point of undue hardship. If, however, you're asking your employees to come to work because it's safe, you've done everything possible, you've taken all the precautions, you're following government recommendations, the employee would technically be obliged to come to work. However, I will caveat that by saying that it's likely that there is a leave provision and human rights protection. I would highly advise that you sought some advice on how to manage individual situations based on their each individual cases. So seek advice, ask for help. What do I do if an employee calls in sick and tells you they think they have COVID? So slow down. At this point, I know it can, that would be friggin' scary. So I want to acknowledge that. At this point, it's all speculation. You don't know. And the truth is, you might not know for sure. They might not call you back if they have confirmed or not confirmed if they have it. And you have to really balance the privacy concerns with making sure you're mitigating, the health and safety risk to other people. And so really recommending, even if somebody says they think, I would deploy special measures to disinfect right away. I would re-communicate the need for employees to practice social distancing, communicate. I would contact public health. And in some cases, they'll give you directions based on the situation and tell you if you need to communicate or not. So they're a really good resource to help you, navigate that situation as well. So what to do if an employee confirms they have been tested and have COVID-19? So this is very scary and probably a reality that we're going to go through. And so first step, contact public health right away, seek guidance. Employees are required to report all illnesses, including COVID-19, to Ministry of Labor in writing. You need to notify your Joint Health and Safety Committee, your union, or your health and safety rep. Again, deploy measures to disinfect right away. And then remind your employees to continue the isolation and self-monitoring requirements and any safety precautions that you have deployed in your business. So sample talking points with employees. So this would be something that I would suggest you paired with, if you actually could share, some talking points, and then you decided to share the definitions chart with your decision tree that exists, might be a good idea. And these are some talking points you can leverage. So it starts with learning. You may have been in contact with someone who has COVID-19, can be scary, may bring up many questions. And then it goes through and says, try to stay calm, Talk about what it means to be in close contact, what happens if you're not in close contact, are you feeling well, and then who do you want them to work with or notify if they can't come to work with for any reason. So have a communication flow set up to deal with these things. So lastly, want to move to temporary layoffs. I know this is a big topic for some, so want to make sure you're thinking about the definition, what it means, what your risks are, because there are some, what questions some employees are asking, how do you communicate it, what are some best practices. So whatever I can share on this front, you know, I'd be happy to. And at the end of this, we are offering a free 30-minute consultation. And so to some of the employees, and I'll explain how to do this at the end, but to some of the employers that are on the call and want to reach out, this would be a good topic for you to actually get some specific advice on around these things. So really, what is a temporary layoff? So when an employer cuts back employees' work by 50% or more, but the key is you're not ending their employment. So even though you've stopped paying them and they're on layoff, you don't owe your termination and notice and severance and all those things when you lay off your employee, because they're still your employee. You haven't ended their employment. So under ESA, it's not more than 13 weeks, but it can be more than 13 weeks if specific conditions exist. And so this is all on the ministry website as well. So there's lots of information. Nothing has changed with that. So some suggestions around how do I select, you know, who to lay off. So you need to be really thoughtful. So what's an objective and consistent way to make these decisions? You need to look at who's being impacted and again, evaluate your human rights impacts. And some examples. So some businesses decide these based on performance, based on key skills, based on diversifying skills, seniority, productivity. You can even ask for volunteers in this particular example as well. You need to determine the best approach that works for your company. So what are some risks? So the employment contract, I got to do a little shout out to the employment contract because I know a lot of people still are doing offers based on handshake. In this environment, it's really coming to light for a lot of employees why there's a value to having some key pieces in your employment contract to protect you. I'm not a fan of the 15-page. I've seen recently, actually, I saw an employment contract that was 15 pages and from an employer, and it was all legal jargon. So all I thought to myself was, if they were trying to hire me, I certainly wouldn't want to work for them. So you have to balance the legal piece of your offer contracts with still making it welcoming. And that can be tricky, but the key pieces in your offer letter that can give you protections is the termination clause and a clause around layoffs that says they accept it as a term of their employment, that layoff might be a possibility down the road. So if you don't have those clauses in the offer letter, or you don't have offer letters, and you lay off people, the employee may be able to claim constructive dismissal. So they would have, it's complaint driven, so it's not like, you know, it's not like the ministry comes after you. The employee has to claim and then the ministry would come to you. So it basically would say that the employee's claiming that, you know, you dismissed them and I want my termination entitlements. And so that's one thing that might happen. And so in this environment, it still might be worth it to take the risk in these cases. And maybe there's some ways to mitigate it. So if you don't have a contract now, maybe when you do a temporary layoff, you can actually write it in a letter format and get them to accept to the terms in a letter. So there's different ways to mitigate that risk. And I would talk about, so termination obligations in general, just high level. So if you don't have a contract that says the employee accepts minimum ESA standards when terminated, then there's this other body of law called common law. It's judge-made law. And it basically starts with the ESA minimums and said, really, what's reasonable? ESA isn't very much, but what's reasonable in this particular person's situation? They might be over 50. They might have specialized skills. There's not a lot of, or it's a hot skill. There's not a lot of jobs in this particular environment. So to get Sally reemployed, it's going to take a lot more time than the ESA determines. So it's more notice and severance than is typically outlined in the ESA. So I'm a big fan of employment contracts having this, so there you go, little plug around that. Key questions. Do employers have to pay employees when on temporary layoff? So again, subject to all your agreements, policies, all that stuff. Otherwise, layoff periods are generally unpaid. Employees may also, on a voluntary basis, use their vacation to continue to receive pay. Do you have to continue benefits and pay pension contributions? So you need to make sure you're checking with your vendor, first of all, to see what the agreement in your contract said around pension and benefit contributions. But for most cases, generally speaking, you don't have to require to continue those contributions during a period of layoff. And lastly, if you need to reduce, if you can't recall them, then in the worst case scenario, you're going to need to look at terminations and reductions in force long term. And these are without cause terminations. And again, your notice and severance obligations apply. So layoffs are stressful. And here's some suggestions for demonstrating great leadership, because really this is a great opportunity to shine in such a stressful environment and to be a good rock for your employees. And there's a lot of good optics involved around this as well. So you care, show them, we're in this together, be prepared. So planning and organizing and having a plan also is a great way to build employee confidence and support. And then I am a huge fan of rolling out the red carpet for exiting employees, including layoffs. I think that it is critical. You don't know, in my opinion, we don't know if you know, when we exit an employee, who they're having lunch with down the road that could be our next big potential client. And I am a big fan of trying to do, you know, handle these with care. Over communicate, even if you don't have the answers, and ensure all the info they required for EI is provided immediately. So again, here's some suggestions again. So we fully understand this is stressful. Don't take this as an opportunity to clean house and get rid of poor performers. Now's not the time. And everyone will notice. And there's a real opportunity for you to play the role of the hero. And people are watching you. And they're looking, especially your top talent. They're watching you and they're judging you and seeing how you're managing this. And if you have critical staff, those are the ones that are going to be picked up as quick as possible in the marketplace. So you want to make sure you get your arms around your key talent and focus on them as well. Book time in your calendars every day to engage your staff through regular check-ins. Be thoughtful, be communicative, and share as much information as you can. So recommended communication flow. This is how I would recommend it if possible. I know it's specific to your business, but a team meeting likely would have to use video conferencing in this world, but sharing what you need to do and why. So, you've been evaluating the financials. I'm a big fan of transparency. You want to set up the business for success long term. You have to reduce expenses. And unfortunately, you're looking at layoffs and explain the why in the context. Following those meetings, I would quickly follow up with one-on-one discussions, and because you don't want to have them living with this stress of knowing it might be coming or who's impacted for a long period of time. So move swiftly to this because they'll want to know. Consider secondary check-ins, and I'm a big fan of the written agreement letters. They're not required for temporary layoffs, but I think they add significant value and clarity and are appreciated. And then how do you manage continued communication with the employees that are remaining actively working and the employees that are being laid off? This is a really good resource that we wanted to share as a reminder. Some of you already know about this particular resource, but it's great for businesses in Durham. Great information, updates here. So highly recommend you pay attention to what's happening on this front. The task force, yes, Dustin just said the task force. Yes, that is what we are saying. Final thoughts. So this is a real opportunity to show true leadership. Make your decisions in good faith. Be as flexible as possible with employees' requests. regularly communicate, have consistent processes, so be consistent, audit your current policies and practices, understand and refresh your employee contracts in the future. You can't go back and get current employees to sign a new contract now, but for future, I would make it a priority for your business. And I would know your risks and make informed decisions and seek advice. There's a lot of resources out there, and don't hesitate to ask. So we are providing a free 30-minute consultation to the first 25 people that will reach out. We would ask that you just email at the email below, info@durhamhrsolutions.ca. Email us, and the first 25, we're happy to do a free consultation. And if you have any questions that you've written down that we didn't cover, because I know everyone's muted, I was a little bit hesitant to open it up for Q&A to try to manage the timeline and not go down a rabbit hole of individual scenarios. So we'll look at for the future, was that the right decision? Maybe not. And we're considering any questions, any feedback you have that you can share. It will really be helpful to inform if and when we do a future webinar and what those topics could be. So very happy about that, to help in that front. And this is our disclaimer. You've probably seen these before, but just a reminder about who we are, and what we are not, and just to protect ourselves here. And that's all I have today, high level. So, couple follow-ups. Employees that are interested in a copy of the deck, just email info@durhamhrsolutions.ca. If you want to be one with the free consultation, email right away. And if you have any questions, feedback, comment, I totally welcome it. We are here for you. We are here to support you. Thank you. And it is definitely hard times for everyone, and there's lots of unknowns. So we'll do our best as we learn more to continue to share with you as well. Okay. Thank you.